Hey guys, this is the Sovereign Entrepreneur Podcast. As always, we have my co-host here, Danny, and then we have my friend Kyle Pezzi on. Just to give a little bit of a preamble, then I'll let Kyle fill in all the details. Kyle and I are close friends. We spent years together in the trenches of investment banking, specifically within healthcare. We ended up becoming real estate investors in some ways together. And then, one of the things that we always talked about in our early 20s when we were first meeting each other was becoming entrepreneurs and like how that was kind of our life goal. And here we are as entrepreneurs, and we're going to kind of talk about it. But yeah, I wanted to give Kyle kind of a platform here to kind of talk about his story, which is extremely inspirational, and kind of where he is today with his search fund and now kind of the CEO of an accounting firm down in Florida. But with that, Kyle, feel free to give your background, and we can kind of take it in any direction you'd like.
Yeah, sure. How far back do you want me to go? I'm happy to start from the beginning.
Whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
man.
Um, well, thanks, Rob and Danny, for having me on. I appreciate it. Um, so, I'm from Kentucky originally. I come from a large family of doctors. I'm really one of the first non-doctors in my family. My dad's a gastroenterologist. My uncles are surgeons. My cousins are in medicine. My grandparents are in medicine. So it's something I've been surrounded by my entire life. And I, for whatever reason, inexplicably, always early on developed an interest in business. And so I had really nobody that was there to be my mentor with that, but it was something that um, inexplicably, it was just something I was so passionate and interested in in a weird, obsessive way. And really starting off around the age of 15, I took a class in economics and kind of fell in love from there. And right around that time, I went through my own personal experience, health experience, where I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma in my right knee, which is a rare form of bone cancer. And so through that whole experience, I spent 100 days in the hospital, had 8 surgeries, and it really changed my life, kind of flipped my life upside down from being a fun, loving 15-year-old that, enjoyed playing video games and just hanging out with friends to really going through that life experience. And so that whole experience changed my entire trajectory of my life and how I thought about my life. And so um, going through that experience, I had a lot of free time while I was in the hospital, and I spent, I had watched every TV show that you could ever watch at that point and had run out. And so one of the things that I spent a lot of time doing is just reading about finance, reading about business, and I just found that to be so interesting. And it was hope for me about finishing that whole life health experience, that after that I would be able to move into something that was um, that next step for me. And so I went from being a below average student that wasn't super focused on school to immediately transitioning into being a top performing student just right after that whole experience of finishing all of my treatments. And so it changed my life and matured me by just entirely. And anyone who knows me now knows me for who I am, but anyone that knew me before understands how much of a transformation I went through at the age of 15 with that whole experience. And so that whole experience combined with that interest in business, I really wanted to meld together my interest in healthcare and business that I developed through that whole pathway. And so um, really matured through that. And ultimately went to Vanderbilt University, where I graduated in 2017 and managed to lock down some healthcare merger and acquisition and investment banking roles, which turned into a full-time job. And that's where I met Rob, working in investment banking full-time, and kind of dealing with, large pharmaceutical or hospital chains and helping them with some of their big strategic decision making. And so it was, the work that we were doing is very interesting, but it was at that stage, it was an absolute grind. I mean, we were working, I had some 125, 130-hour weeks where I was just delirious. I remember passing out in the shower, and there was people that had some health incidents there. And so
And
I
some,
knew I needed
yeah,
to
some
move
very
into
serious incidents. Like there was a suicide, right? Like let's not sweep it under the rug. Like it's an industry that really can break people down. And I mean, I think like we came out the better for it, but there's some people that don't make it. It's really unfortunate.
yeah, and nothing's worth that type of commitment, in my opinion. I mean, literally nothing is worth it. And for me, having gone through near-death experiences already in my life, I felt like I had gotten out of it as much as I was going to get, and there was diminishing marginal returns after that first year. And so,
Dude, I
Rob, you
remember
went
the
through
third
that
week on
same
the
thing.
job. Yeah, dude, I remember the third week on the job. Well, one, our internship was just like sunshine and roses. Like we were just putting logos together on a PowerPoint spreadsheet. And we're like, oh, this thing isn't so bad. Like this
Misleading.
job is awesome. Like gonna make all this money to do this. And then you come in, and the part of the reason why it was so bad was because our summer internship was during Brexit, and so the economy was in disarray. And so we had 16 kids in our internship class. I think 12 of which were Ivy League. And then they were like, yeah, we're only going to take 50% of you. And so it was like very much like Lord of the Flies, like every man for himself, like play the political game. And, thankfully we both made it. But yeah, I remember our third week on the job, like my entire reality was kind of shattered because like I was on like two IPOs and like two M&As at the same time, and I did like 110 hours. And I remember like I left the office at 4 a.m. and I woke up at 7 a.m. and I had an associate that was like, dude, why didn't you finish this work? Why weren't you there the entire night? And I remember I broke into tears, dude. And like I almost like shut off my phone and I was like, fuck this. Like I'm not gonna be doing this anymore. And like I'm glad I stuck with it, but it really kind of I think tested our mental bandwidth and like our ability to persevere through like a really difficult period of time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like obviously I went through that whole cancer experience, but there were some times during this investment banking gig that I reached a limit that I didn't know was possible. And there were just times where I felt like I really worked my ass off and there was no appreciation for the work that I was doing. And there's some people that I remember just how they treated us in those moments, and I'm just never going to forget the way that they treated
Yeah,
some of us. And there was no appreciation. There's a handful of people that we worked with that really, I think, did really appreciate the work we were doing and tried to make it better. But I was always of the opinion that some of the people that stayed in that career had the wrong priorities in life in the first place. And so it became a bit of a self-selection bias where if someone stayed in that for the long period of time, this is not always the case, but in some cases there were people that stayed there because they probably didn't have their life
oh,
priorities right.
completely, dude. They were looking at us as resources to be exploited, like faceless resources. Like a lot of the managing directors that we were slaving away for didn't even care to meet us. And some of them did, right? And like I think we probably know who we're talking about in both
Yes.
camps. Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of like self-selecting for psychopaths, I think what are the top three or four professions of psychopaths? CEOs, policemen, and I think Wall Street would probably be up there as well, which is kind of crazy and also unsurprising at the same time. But I know, like you said, going through the cancer experience and like when I was 15, like I had a formative experience in my life too, right? Like my dad committed suicide, and like I think the first year of investment banking in that year, like definitely the two worst years of my life. But I'm actually curious to hear your perspective. Like I know we want to talk a lot about business, but like even just philosophically, like I don't think we would be where we are today and as successful were it not for those experiences. I mean, would you tend to agree with that?
Yeah, the way I would put it is, well, first of all, on the cancer side, there's no question that I would probably be having a middling success right now. I would have been an average student. I would not have gone to Vanderbilt. I would not be an entrepreneur. I would not have been in finance at the highest levels. There's just no doubt. I mean, I was not a focused person, and I've matured by 10 years through that whole experience. And I think the same thing can be said about the investment banking job. It was such a great learning experience, and not just from a technical perspective, but just how to deal with just really challenging situations and work with really challenging people. I would never want to do it again, but I'm glad I did it the first time around.
Would you encourage your son or daughter to go into investment banking, right? Because it's one of those things where you get so much experience compressed in such a small period of time, and you literally become a robot and like a business expert by the time you're like 23 or 24. And making like a lot of money, like, going on road shows with CEOs, going in the boardrooms, but the cost is so great at the same time. But it also tees up, I mean, and you're going to get into this, like going into the hedge fund world, or for me, going into private equity. So like it was an investment. It was like almost going through Navy SEAL boot camp, and it paid off. But like, dude, it kind of tested our limits, I think.
I don't, it's hard because like you love your children more than anything in the world. And I've heard so many stories of existing investment bankers just not pushing their kids into that route. And my dad, as a doctor, did not push me into the medicine route. And I think in some ways he kind of dissuaded me from it. I don't know what the right decision is. I think you have to think about the specific like interests of the person
Yeah.
that you're raising. But ultimately, I think you have to be a very specific type of person that really wants to succeed at the highest level to do it. Because if you're not like totally locked in, you are going to flame out really quickly. And Rob and I made it through 1 year, which was not even a 2 year program, and we were already ready to move out.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah,
found
we
great
should
success in
segue.
other roles that were better for us by far, and it led to more growth. But I mean, that just goes to show that, like, in my opinion, Rob and I are two of the hardest working people that I can think of. And the fact that we found that it just wasn't rational to continue, it's just hard to imagine how most people, unless they have a real chip on their shoulder, are going to be willing to go through that experience.
Yeah, dude. And like, I think, I mean, not to toot our own horns, but like if having gone through investment banking, like people see that on a resume and they're like, okay, this person's a serious
Sticks with you
businessman.
forever.
Yeah. And then like secondly too, um, I think I lost my train of thought, but like, also, so I think investment banking is where it really became clear to me that I wanted to become an entrepreneur, because just going through that experience, like people telling you what to do, giving you deadlines, saying just fucking do it, and not even saying thank you after you kind of pulled an all-nighter is like, dude, I need to start my own business because like I literally hate you, and I hate being told what to do, and I want to put a hole in my monitor. But like, was that kind of the same? Was that same for you? Like when it, I mean, just when did you realize you wanted to become an entrepreneur? And like, how did you actually kind of actively chart your path into becoming one?
So on the first point that you were making, I think investment banking actually taught me how not to manage people. And so I feel like a lot, but I learned that in some other roles as well throughout the course of my career. But I found out what is not the appropriate approach for managing people. And so in some ways, I got to see the exact opposite of how I want to implement things in my career and how I want to work with people. And I think ultimately it helps grow me into what I am today by just seeing the opposite end of how you should be doing things. On the entrepreneurial side, I think it was something that was ingrained in me by my grandfather and my father. My father was started off, and really for the first 25 years of his career, he was a private practice gastroenterologist. And so it was a lot more common to be a private practitioner, a solo practitioner, or you have a partner or two partners, that you would have these smaller local, doctor groups, and you used to be able to make just as much money being a independent group. Nowadays, obviously, there's been changes in reimbursement, and so the scaled groups usually get better reimbursement negotiation, and also have better business skills to bring in the volume necessary. But my dad always was a lone wolf and wanted to work for himself and had his own team. And ultimately, just through some of the changes that occurred in the hospital market and consolidation of some of the hospitals and ASCs in his area, he was forced to go back into being an employee again. And he went through this whole experience of, I would say, just not transitioning super well into that. And ultimately now it's fine and he's doing well. But I think during that whole experience, he really impressed upon me that you should be working for yourself, and Pezzi's work for themselves. And so I think that was ingrained in me from a young age. And maybe I had an ego combined with that being impressioned upon me. And ultimately, I always felt like I was employed by people that were really just older versions of myself that weren't as effective at their job as I would be if I was as experienced as they were. And so maybe that's a little bit of my ego, but really I think it's also just I'm very independent minded, and I question things around me, and I always have since the beginning of time. And I just really felt, why is someone else able to go through that experience and have that type of success? And if on my deathbed I haven't at least tried to do that, I'm going to regret it. And so thinking a little bit of, I think really the beginning for me was the cancer experience. And so realizing that like I should be shooting for the stars on everything I do, because life is short and you never know when it's going to end. But I also think reading an Amazon book about one of the concepts by Bezos is the regret minimization
Yeah.
framework. And for me, there's just nothing more impactful than that regret minimization framework, and thinking about how you should make decisions in your life, and thinking about what actually matters in your life and what doesn't. And so I try to live my life according to that. And I think it all just pointed towards entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and there's those studies too, right? Like where they pull people at the end of their lives and they're longitudinal studies, so they follow people through their lives. And like, what was the single biggest contributor to happiness? Not money, not material goods. It's the relationships, and it's like the number of people that love you and the number of people that you love, right? And like that's truly what matters at the end of the day.
For me, I get a lot of my personal satisfaction from business, and it's not the financial part of it. It's just the feeling of importance of being
The
able
game of
to.
it. Yeah,
It's a game in some ways, and it's a very important responsibility when you have a group of employees, obviously. But it's the most fun I've ever had, despite all the challenges. But for me, it's that, and then family, and then everything else falls really far below that.
completely, man. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what happened after investment banking
Yeah.
and yeah, your career since then?
Yeah, sure. So I spent about a year in investment banking, and an opportunity kind of opportunistically came up within at the same bank we worked at, to work in equity research with someone who was the number one ranked medical device analyst on the equity research side, who now works as a kind of the number three in command at Medtronic, and is just a legend in the industry. And so um, an opportunity came up to do that, and really what that role was is just advising investors on their positions in medical device companies, and also really getting a lot of exposure to management teams and companies that are going public. And so on the investment banking side, there was, a fair bit of financial modeling and PowerPoint experience. And, there were some times where you could have the chance to meet the CEOs of these companies. But when I moved into equity research, it put me in a position where this analyst was so busy at times that he would just have to leave me on a call with the CFO of CVS Health, or just name some major large medical device company, and Bob couldn't join, so I just had to hop on the call and ask questions. And suddenly these CFOs and CEOs of these major 50,000 person companies were, I was asking them questions, and going on earnings calls, and you can still find my name on some of these earnings call transcripts, just because I just got thrown into the fire with 10 minutes notice. And so I think that experience ended up being like the best decision I made in my career, from a career change perspective, because I just got thrown into the fire. And the one thing about investment banking, which I think there's a reason for it, because the money at stake is just so high by having a junior analyst that messes something up. So people are careful about putting analysts in front of management teams. But that being thrown into the fire concept is really how you learn. And so I went through this like phase of development and maturity, and ability to work in a professional environment with people at the highest level really quickly. And so that was just an amazing experience for me, and was still a huge grind, but ultimately was that, I think, really changed me into the leader that I am, and in my ability to work on my feet, and handle tough situations without much preparation. And so I did that for 2.5 years before I moved into some hedge fund and asset management roles, which I really wanted to get more into making some of these investment decisions, and doing that. And so I moved over to a hedge fund, and then later opportunistically joined a large asset manager, where I helped kind of lead some of the healthcare investing efforts there. And so my career up to that point was all within the context of healthcare, but ultimately I felt like I could spend the rest of my career in that landscape. Um, and I would have done great and, maybe lived in Greenwich and had that commute into the city and had that kind of dream life that a lot of people look for. But I found myself, having done some real estate on the side since the beginning of my time out of college and did well with that and just really found a lot of personal fulfillment from that and found myself thinking and spending a lot of time talking about it with Rob and others. And so that was my first foray into entrepreneurship, and I kind of dipped my toes into it. And so I went through that, and I was just yearning for more. And I moved into the car wash business after that, which was more operationally intensive and obviously more advanced and challenging. And you got employees and all kinds of issues. And even through ups and downs that we've had in that investment, I just found myself obsessed with the work that I was doing. And so I just found myself in a position where I just couldn't see myself not doing it, and just going back to that regret minimization framework of it's time for me to take a risk. I'm financially in a position that I can take several years to do something risky because I had been very frugal through that period of time. And and ultimately, I raised capital from a group of investors, and I went out and decided to search for a business to kind of acquire and make an investment in, and then ultimately operate as CEO. And that's what kind of brought me to where I am today.
How is your, one last question, I'll let Danny jump in, but like most people that do a search fund are coming out of Harvard or Stanford. And how is your experience actually, convincing the pools of capital to give you money? And what was kind of your pitch? And like, I guess, what did you articulate as your competitive edge as to why you would be successful versus the MBAs?
I think it's well, first of all, I think it's something like 80% or of these search tradition. There's really two different models within search. There's self-funded search, which really anyone can do. You fund an acquisition yourself, and then there's the traditional search model, which is really the Stanford, Harvard, MBA, Wharton MBA model. And so the traditional search model has always been, and just for anyone that doesn't know what a search fund is, a search fund is basically a fund where a group of investors come together. They fund a 2-year search process, and ultimately they give you anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000 to fund all the expenses associated with the legal fees, the accounting fees, busted deal costs, and all of these things. And this opportunity is typically given to high performing MBA students with interesting careers before that have real management and private equity experience. And they'll go out and they'll acquire a small business with anywhere between 2 to 5 million in profit per year, for anywhere between 7 to 25 or $30 million, deal value. And traditionally, most of those searchers have come out of a handful of schools that really are often just called the search fund mafia. And so what has happened is there's been, over the last 10 years, there's been an explosion of searchers, but historically it was a very niche area where, you had a handful of searchers each year going into this model, and the investors were mostly really successful former search fund entrepreneurs and that had acquired a business, and then ultimately made millions and millions of dollars from the outcome there. And so the search fund model has really transformed and grown over the last couple of years. And typically each year there's about 150 people that are going out raising money from a group of institutional investors, and then they're going out and acquiring a business of the scale that I mentioned. And most of those are MBAs. Each year there's maybe 15% of them are either they never got their MBA, or maybe they were an executive or a CEO of another company, and so they had a non-traditional cut type of background. Ultimately, I think what teetered me over the edge of getting my way through is that I just completely took the bull by the horns, and through some of the things that I learned on the investment banking side, I really pretty much conducted my own IPO roadshow, and I just cold emailed everybody that I could possibly reach out to within the community that is a known investor in the space. And ultimately, I found, 50% of the companies investment firms that I emailed responded to my email to schedule a call. And then, something like 60 or 70% of those people that I spoke with ended up, funding me that 500,000 up front, and then ultimately funding the deal that I did. And so, I think some of the experiences I've had, my personal life experiences and the resilience that I can demonstrate from that, my time in investment banking combined with that operating experience, and the demonstration of my independence shown by the real estate work and the car wash work that I've done. I think in the eyes of a lot of these investors, I was de-risked on a relative basis compared to a MBA who's never run a business before or never done anything independent like owning real estate. So I think I compared fairly well compared to them. And I think ultimately there will be more and more people that did not go through that traditional path that will find their way into the model. It just requires scrappy networking. And that's something that I feel that has been one of my biggest strengths. I would never consider myself to be extremely charismatic or a backslapper or anything like that. And nobody would ever say that about me either that knows me. But I do feel that I'm extremely effective at gaining the trust of people, because I'm trustworthy and honest and transparent, to honestly to a fault at times. And I think that got through to the investors, and ultimately established the trust in me to do this. And I think that it was refreshing to see that type of approach.
Danny, you want to jump in with anything, man? I have some questions on like the broader macro on search funds before we jump into the acquisition you made, but feel free to jump in with anything if you have anything.
No, you can ask your macro questions first. I'll wait.
Kyle, we have 10,000 people turning 65 every single day. And a lot of those people are business owners. What kind of dynamic does that produce within the broader search fund industry? And for some of the people that are listening, that I think like the search fund is like a matter of risk tolerance, right? Like you have the Peter Thiel taking company from 0 to 1, and I've decided to do that. And dude, it sucks, right? It's a headache, and like you end up owning more of the equity stack, but it's definitely a higher beta approach to entrepreneurship. And then there's kind of the more reliable way to get to 8 figures, which net worth, which is I think the approach that you're taking with the search fund. And you could take a foundational asset that is probably suboptimized, where someone like you that has the healthcare investment banking, healthcare, private equity, hedge fund experience can go in and kind of revolutionize the asset and increase the EBITDA and ultimately produce a really good outcome for you and your investors. I think a lot of people would resonate with that and would be interested in doing that because it's a really good risk return. And so like that interest mixed with kind of the broader dynamic of baby boomers retiring, like what do you see for the search fund industry, I guess, between now and 2030?
So, all right. So I'll start with the trend, the silver tsunami, which is usually what people call that, and then we'll get into the reasoning behind why search funds have become so popularized. So this concept of the silver tsunami is that something like $2 trillion is going to be transferring hands from business owners that don't have any succession plan whatsoever. And we're talking about small business owners, in the range of size of $500,000 in profit a year to $5 million a year in profit. And so there's obviously many more businesses under $1 million than there are above, but there's still a significant number. And it's a very common issue that business owners, their kids aren't interested in getting into their career. Maybe they own a waste management company or just come up with any random company you could ever imagine. Everything that we see in this world is made by somebody. And oftentimes children have other interests. They might be interested in software engineering. Maybe they financially have a trust fund, so they don't have as much of an
I was just
interest
going to
in
say,
working
maybe they're
hard.
trust fund babies.
Maybe they're so wealthy they
figures.
don't have any incentive to work hard, right? Which is its own issue. And so what's happening is there's a lot of these business owners who don't really have that good of a action plan for transitioning their business. Maybe they're not private equity sized, and so a private equity firm is not going to be interested typically in some of these businesses because there's some missing links with the way the business is operated. It's a smaller size business. There's more risk tied to it. The owner of the business is probably involved in a lot of the daily operations. And so that obviously creates a scenario where you can't afford to pay as high of a valuation for the business. And so there's a lot of business owners who just don't know what to do with their business. And so this concept of the search fund is really, you raise capital and you acquire a business, and then you go operate that business as CEO, and you take over and learn from that departing seller, and you really ingrain yourself in the operations of the business. But then you've got a board of directors surrounding you who's already done it 5 times or 50 times, and so they have seen what works and doesn't work. They've seen the pitfalls, and they've really seen it all, and really they just kind of work for you to serve as a resource to train you into the next generation of a CEO. And so it has become a extremely effective way of acquiring small and medium-sized businesses, and has had a lot of success from an internal rate of return perspective. And so I think it's becoming a more mainstream approach to taking advantage of this challenge that a lot of these retiring business owners have. And there's really no better way to preserve your legacy than to sell it to somebody that you actually like spending time with, a real human being. And private equity firms have a tough time looking any different from other private equity firms, but also they look very institutional. They often are published that they're going to be selling your company within 4 to 5 years. They have certain investor requirements. And so that is something that I think private equity has really faltered amongst a lot of business owners who care about the outcome of their business. And I'm not saying that private equity is evil or anything like that, but ultimately there is another way to sell your business to somebody that you want to be running your business, and to take care of your employees in a way that is very predictable. And so I think that that's why this model has resonated so greatly.
Yeah, and I think like if you think about risk return, right? Like if you want to have a chance at 8 or 9 figures in net worth, like you kind of have to take a lot of risk. Like you could go down the private equity hedge fund route, which I think is probably the lowest risk return, but also like if you're entrepreneurial at all, it's gonna be soul crushing for you. I think like the best risk return to get to 8 figures is exactly the path you're taking. And I think like for those that are entrepreneurial, that want to take that step into becoming an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship by acquisition, i.e., synonymous with search fund, is a great route. And just like one kind of high level comment, I think like the entire private equity model is gradually evolving to like, let's take this business and let's AI enable it. And so I think like people our age that are fluent with AI and are able to kind of build the back end with AI systems and automations are going to be able to kind of go in and buy these legacy baby boomer businesses and do something special with them. And so I think there's going to be a really big opportunity here over the next few years. And I hope people kind of see, take the bull by the horns, whether the saying is, just like you, and kind of make something happen with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's problems and benefits to transitioning out of an ownership group. And I think the problems with transitioning owners out of businesses is that owner got the business to where they are, so they're probably pretty awesome at building a company. They're really critical a lot of times, and if the business was running itself really effectively, then why would they be selling it typically, unless there's something fundamentally at risk with the company, right? And so I've found that typically what happens is someone that's selling the business is burnt out, or they have a life event, or they're too old. But there are many times where there's something fundamentally at risk with the company, or there's a structural problem in the industry. And so you have to understand those dynamics. And so you've got the negatives of, you've got that important person that has been running the company and building relationships with everyone in the business and making promises for the growth of the employees that, sometimes the next person in line can't really keep those promises because just didn't fit in the total context. But then you've got the opposite side of the coin, which you were alluding to, Rob, which is that you can really come in with an outside view of things. And often you get myopic when you're running a business for a long period of time, and you're not spending a lot of time with peers, and you're not spending time with your competitors. And you start getting lost in a changing industry because you're just doing things and focusing on your clients, and you're so busy that you ultimately lose track of some of these strategies, and suddenly the pricing models in the industry have changed, and the tech in the industry has changed. And so, that's something I've found since I've gotten on board, where there have been some fundamental changes in the industry, and ultimately, I think that there's some real possibilities in terms of growth that we just haven't even considered. There's plenty of opportunity on the tech side to improve our processes and to create efficiencies. But back to your point about the 0 to 1, and then so the 0 to 1 in my mind is you start a business from scratch and you build it up. I mean, there's the often cited statistic of 50% failure rates for business starting businesses. I think if you stripped out restaurants and some of these really common areas that create a lot of failure, I think some of these franchises as well, like anything involving food service and anything, maybe like consulting firms and things like that. I think if you had service-based businesses that are providing like a very common service and it's not a new concept, I think the failure rate would be a lot lower than is often cited. But I think the most significant challenge with starting a business, is just not having the money to be able to support the losses that are necessary to invest in the business in a way that you can actually create real value. And so even with a business of my scale, and we're certainly in the search fund scale range of size, we have 50 employees at our firm. I still feel like I'm missing so many resources right now that are just hampering our ability to grow this company. And so if we had some of those things, I think we could take our company to 100 employees and double our revenue. But just imagining what it would be like to have 10 employees or 5 employees, the resources that I would have at that point, or anyone would have, is so small. And Rob, you've seen it yourself with some of the companies that you've started. You're having to do things that are not actually benefiting the growth of the business in any way. And you're spending 20 or 30 hours a week on non-value add things that you just don't have the money to outsource.
And that's an interesting point too, dude. And like, I could kind of wed that with what you were saying about like one individual within the organization that the organization is overly dependent on. And so like when we were in private equity, we call that key man risk or key woman risk, right? Where like one individual is so central to the operations, whether through their personal brand or they're just injected it into the business, and a key dependency and a key bottleneck, that's going to be reflected in the valuation, right? So like with search funds, for example, like if the business is capable of operating itself, that kind of business is going to fetch a higher valuation, all else equal, than one that's relying on one individual, right? And as entrepreneurs, especially for someone like me that's taking a business from 0 to 1, it's obviously top of mind for me to not be the key man. I think like in the beginning, you have to accept that that's going to be, a fixture of the business. But the sooner I could decouple myself from a company like Avenir or a company like SovDoc, that it's going to be more efficient, and I free up my time to be spent on higher impact, higher value things, which is kind of what you were talking about. But at the same time, it's going to fetch in a higher multiple at exit or at strategic transaction. And so like so much of it is, firing yourself progressively from every single area of the organization and working on rather than in the business, which is a cliche, but it's absolutely true as a CEO. And I think kind of like, that's kind of what you were talking about just now.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the process right now. There's this concept of like visionary leaders who have the ideas and they need to sit with their head in the clouds and think about the direction of the business and why things need to be done a certain way, and what we're trying to accomplish. And then there's the implementers, who are the ones who kind of go out and implement that plan. And so
the COO, right? The COO,
right, the COO or president, or really just the executive team. But at our company, we're in the process of thinking of ways that we can get me out of the weeds and kind of allow me to be more of that, strategic thinker, rather than putting out fires on a daily basis with some of the challenges that every CEO has. And so there are different operating systems that you're able to implement when you have enough employees to help put accountability on other people for certain processes. And if you have too small of a business, the accountability falls squarely on yourself. And obviously at the end of the day, it falls on myself no matter what. But ultimately, you have more people that can be accountable for some of these things, and you can hold them accountable, for any individual division or practice area or whatever it may be for your particular business.
Yeah, and like, what's the job of any employee, right? And whether it's like the lowest rung of the organization or the highest rung of the organization, it's to increase the productivity of those that they're working under, right? And if that starts with the beginning, and it's basically just progressively amplifying the productivity as you go up within the food chain and organization. So a COO or a chief of staff that's directly reporting to you, their entire job is to free up your time so your time can be spent on higher impact activities. And so like specifically with me, with like the micro of my second company, SovDoc, like my entire operational layer is Saudi med students in their early 20s that are hungry for healthcare business experience. And they're so smart. I mean, they're smarter than me, right? And like I basically go to them and I'm like, from a high level, just take things off my plate. Like I want my calendar to be filled with doctor meetings and doctor calls, and I don't want to do anything else. And with like we're in the third month of revenue, I'm 95% there. And like I'm literally on the phone all day, but like I think that's where people like me and you and excel, Kyle. And like I think at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, the nirvana is like being able to hop on calls, like you say stuff, and things get done within the organization, and you're really able to operate as what you called that visionary leader, right? And so like my goal like over the next couple months is like fill up my schedule every single day. I'm on the phone all day, and then the least priority calls I'm outsourcing to a sales director or some other people in the organization, and then eventually all calls are done by a sales team. And then I'm going on going to conferences and panels and stuff like that, and going on podcasts like this. But yeah, I guess like you just bought the company like pretty recently. Like where are you at today? And I guess like where do you want to be in a year, and like where do you want the organization to be? And then we could kind of talk about like the rest of the whole period.
Yeah, so about 4 months ago, we made a strategic investment in Solutions Group accounting firm, which is the company I'm now CEO of. And really, it's this firm is a great company. We've got 50 employees. We provide really every service you would need as a business owner, from a business tax planning, bookkeeping, payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and really what our goal is to be an advisory partner on your outsourced financial department as a business owner. And so a lot of business owners are kind of jerry-rigging their financial systems together, and they're using one different software and it doesn't connect with the other one. And really what our goal is to outsource all of your financial processes so you don't have that key man or woman risk in your company with 5 or 6 different employees that are involved in different processes. You can outsource your processes in one bundled solution over to our company, and we can provide that service. And so I was really excited about the potential in this market, because there's so many business owners who just have suboptimal financial processes, and just being able to serve as an advisor to clients and help them with that challenge is something that I was really passionate about. And so I moved into this business on May 7th, and we've got 2 of the key.
Oh, so literally 4 months.
Literally 4 months.
Yeah.
And
Nice. Good stuff.
the 2 founders of the business are remaining on board for the foreseeable future, and we have a great partnership. And really the first 4 months have been me just trying to get to know everybody, get to know our systems and processes, and really focusing on a few critical areas that are kind of gaps in our business, and focusing on growth, but also just focusing on improving our relationship with clients, identifying opportunities, and really just driving forward the company and continuing the growth going forward. We've been growing 25 to 30% every month since I got in the door. Our sales processes have been, very consistent. And so we're just tweaking some of the ways that we approach our customers, and we create value with our customers. And really, I've been spending a ton of my time either going out and winning new clients, but also hiring very, valuable people to our company to help build out the knowledge base that we have here, and just so we can provide a better service to our clients. And those are what I need to be spending my time on. Those are like the 2 areas. But obviously I get bogged down in a million different things every single day, and I spend 7 hours dealing with an employee issue, or dealing with a client issue, or something that had happened, or the list is long of all of the things I've had to deal with at this point. And so you get distracted as you start to shore up the business and
Yeah, and
get
like
it into a
you're talking
position.
about, yeah, and you were talking about problems, right? And bottlenecks. And part of having a growth mindset as an entrepreneur is not looking at those as bad things, but as opportunities for EBITDA, right? Like you solve a problem and you fix a bottleneck and you make something more efficient, that increases your EBITDA. Just as like you look at an area in the economy, whether it's climate change or what have you, right? Micro problem, macro problem. The pessimist is going to say, oh my gosh, like the sky is falling, Chicken Little. Or you could be the entrepreneur capitalist that's like, holy shit, if I solve that problem, I'm going to get so stupidly rich, right? And like that applies to the macro, but that also applies to the micro within a company.
I'm getting my face punched in every single day of the week. And honestly, more than one time a day, there's just terrible news that's coming to my desk. And Elon Musk said it once, being a CEO is basically saying that all the problems that other people can't figure out themselves at your company get rise to the top, and then the only thing you hear all day is bad news. And it's really true. And that's pretty much what my first 4 months has been. But ultimately, in the context of all the bad things that normally happen when you're in these positions, I've seen such an insane opportunity to grow this firm well beyond where we are today. And there's just so much low-hanging fruit of new ways we can serve our clients without much challenge. There's pricing changes that we can make that more fairly value the services that we're providing, the premium service we're providing to our clients. There are lots of positive staffing promotions that we can make of people on the team that are capable of a lot more than they were able to really accomplish previously. And so, the growth of this market has been so significant. And because the growth is so significant, it puts us in a position that we can be pretty selective with the clients that we take on. And we can put ourselves in a position where we're really serving clients in a specific way. And we are not willing to serve clients if we're not a trusted advisor. We're not interested in processing work for our clients and just leaving it and just doing your taxes at the end of the year. We're only interested in being a truly trusted partner that you interact with regularly with the client and serve as a real friend and advisor to that client. And so we found great success really quickly in just transitioning towards that model. And with the amount of demand there is out in this market, I mean, there's really no reason we can't triple the size of this company over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and that quote from Elon is being an entrepreneur in a nutshell is staring into the abyss and eating glass at the same time.
Yep.
It's like that is like so jarring but so accurate. Like I and also I liked yours too. It's like I get punched in the face every day as an entrepreneur, and I know I feel very much the same way. And there's always something that has the potential to stress you out. But I mean, I was just listening to this guided meditation recently, and it kind of really hit, which is basically like it's all gonna work out in the long run. And so like you really should kind of be embracing that mentality on a day-to-day basis and seeing all these roadblocks and all of this adversity as paths for growth, right? That's kind of like the Ryan Holiday, the adversity is the way, or I think that's it, right? The obstacle is the way. The obstacle is the way, right? And like the path of pain is the path of growth. And honestly, I think that's the fastest path to kind of success within the entrepreneurial domain and financially.
I think a lot of people are afraid of adversity, and that is the biggest resistance that you would have as an entrepreneur. That you kind of have to be you genuinely have to be crazy, because the odds are stacked against you a lot of times in entrepreneurship. I mean, you see these circumstances of Elon Musk or Bezos or Zuckerberg, or even smaller examples of success. But there is a long list of failures that is just hidden. And you see that with the 50% statistic, but you also see it with your family members that struggled in business, or my fiance is a bankruptcy lawyer, and that's all she does all day is deal with corporate bankruptcies. And so she's the opposite.
She may as well be working at a morgue, dude.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so all she does all day is just think I'm crazy because I'm taking all the risk that I'm taking. But
Yep.
to be able to have the reward that people are looking for, you kind of have to be a little bit kind of messed up in the head.
Yeah.
And so I think you got to throw caution to the wind a little bit, but if you can do so in a calculated way, it's just an unbelievable path. But it requires a certain type of person. I think you've talked about this in some other podcasts, but I really think that nobody is born an entrepreneur. I do not believe that at all. You can make yourself into one, but you've got to have a lot of certain types of skills, and most of it I think is just resilience and willingness to just never quit. I think if I was to just say there's one skill, it's really that, because I know people who don't have great social skills, they don't know how to sell, who can be great leaders in different ways. Like leaders don't always look the same. But I think just the resilience piece of it is really what's done so well for me in my career. But I've seen every which type of leader.
Yeah, what do you think up to this point, Kyle? What do you think the biggest failure you've had is up to this point in business?
Oh man, I mean, I've had many failures. I mean, I think the car wash business was buying that at the peak of the market in 2021, with Florida being an amazing performing market during that time because of COVID and all of the lockdowns, and everyone wanting to be in the one place that was more fair with the whole lockdown thing. And so the population grew significantly and it created better than average financial results. And so we bought these car washes at the top of the market, and ultimately it's really turned against us. And so it's really tested our will, and it's been a real challenge going through that whole experience, and losing money at times in certain months and having to make tough decisions, pricing decisions, or strategy decisions, and just seeing how I act and how our partners act in those tough situations. There's some people who are crippled by it and can't handle it and they have to bail out. And then there's others who are just going down with the ship the whole way, and that's what I am. And so, those types of challenges, which will ultimately turn around, I think are the long-term test, because almost every entrepreneur that I know, I mean, I know several extremely successful real estate entrepreneurs who have neared bankruptcy 3 to 4 times in their lives. And so they neared bankruptcy, but they neared it, right? They didn't go through it. And the reason that they were able to get past it is because they were scrappy as hell, and they just would not take no for an answer, and they would find a way to get out of that horrific situation. And so for me, I try to learn from that knowing that great entrepreneurs often go through moments of near failure. And even the top most successful multi-billion-dollar entrepreneurs out there, even Elon Musk has said that Tesla's nearly gone through bankruptcy several times
Dude, he
over.
came so close. Like, I don't know if you read that Walter Isaacson book recently on him, but like he basically with the after in the wake of the Great Recession, the Great Financial Crisis, he had that choice of like, do I save SpaceX or do I save Tesla? And he was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do both. And thankfully it worked out. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't really know who Elon's name was outside of PayPal and outside of
Right.
Yeah.
us too.
Or have those companies on the on planet Earth, right? Like,
Yeah.
look at how many people use every NASA satellite is launched by SpaceX now. Everyone in California is driving a Tesla, right? Everyone uses solar city panels. They all have the Tesla chargers on the wall. They're like revolutionizing the planet because they came to a fork in the road and said, I'm going left instead of right, right? I'm rolling the dice. And if I get my face completely kicked in, who cares? I'll just do it again, right? And like that's I've loved just sitting here listening to this conversation because we have very different personalities, but my mind is very much the same as yours. And like I'm like listening to you, I'm like, man, he must have read that book, he must have read that book, right? Like it's just so great. And the resilience factor is like I grew up playing tennis, right? I'm a big tennis player, and especially I'm from the Northeast, and we have clay on the Northeast, right? And
Yeah.
a tennis match on clay is just a marathon grind. It's who can outlast the other person, right? And
Nadal, baby.
that's right, the king of clay. And my dad was a Wall Street guy. He was on a different side. I work in finance as well, and um, like the lesson is like life is just like a game, a tennis match, right? Like if you can just outlast the other guy, if you can get kicked in the face one more time and just get up one more time than the other guy, so at some point nobody else is going to be left, and you're going to be the only one standing there, right? And I think that's so important, that resiliency factor. And like, how do you think that is really played a part? Like, where do you think you developed that resiliency factor? Because I also don't think everyone's born with that either, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think we all, so where do you think that really like kicked in and developed for you, where you were like, I'm not going to quit no matter what. I'm going down with the ship. Like, that's what I'm doing.
I don't think people are born with it. I think it's usually a life experience, and Rob has had his own life experiences as well that I think developed, at least in my opinion, it seems that developed into what he is. With my experience with cancer and almost dying, I think it was more like there's no excuse but to try to reach for the sky. And I think having seen the bottom of what like the worst situation you can be in, I mean, I was basically unable to walk for 3 months and went through excruciating pain and basically had like half of my leg like removed, the bone in my leg removed, and just some like terrible stuff. Two lung surgeries where I was bleeding out of a tube for a period of time. And so having gone through that experience, I think everything seems pretty easy after that because that was pretty damn bad. And so I think that experience creates a lot of resilience, and my mindset just switched right after that, and it's impossible to explain, but I do think there's a lot of people in this world who um, there are some people who get kicked down by that experience and then they don't get up and then they kind of fall off the deep end and just never recover. But then there are people who just use it as an opportunity, and obviously not everyone's in control of their own circumstances, but this for me was an opportunity to reach my fullest potential. And I honestly don't think I could have done better at anything I've done in my entire life up to this point. Like I think I've literally reached the highest potential of what I'm capable of, and there's almost nothing else I can do beyond what I'm at right now.
Yeah, dude.
And that's I'm happy with that.
Yeah, and like you're talking about like the concept of like are entrepreneurs born or are they developed? And like if I had to think, I think there's a certain commonality and common denominators amongst personality traits, but you could have extroverts, you could have introverts, but like it's a lot of the times it's people that have gone through suffering and adversity, right? And like we talk about the concept of pain tolerance on this podcast a lot. It's like if you've been through that profound suffering and that profound pain, like the day-to-day trials and adversities as an entrepreneur, although those don't feel good, you could push through them, whereas like another person would be probably dissuaded from even like, undergoing them at all, but, would probably prompt them to give up at some point. And so I think that's one. And I think it's like you were talking about ego earlier. And I think part of it maybe is ego, but it's also just like confidence in yourself, confidence that it's going to work out in the long run and that you're going to be able to make it happen. And, maybe ego is a precondition for that. If so, fine. Call us all egotistical.
It
I
doesn't
don't
have
really
to be
give
a
a fuck.
bad thing to have
Yeah.
I mean, an ego can be harmful, obviously, but I mean, I think I just have confidence in my abilities and I'm willing to, and I think honestly, if you are confident, it really shows, and it helps you succeed more when you're more confident. And you can't fake it though. You really have to have more confidence in what you're doing, but it makes such a significant difference in what you're capable of accomplishing if you can confidently state your opinion on things and not be afraid of being wrong. And so I always talk to my fiance about this, about how important that, having that confidence is in the workplace, because I think people can sense it and it really impacts your abilities to succeed. On your point, Rob, about the introvert thing, I'm a huge introvert in my opinion.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I really am though. I don't seek times of like I don't like to go out and do social things except for people that I'm like close with. I lose energy from social activity.
Well, that's the true definition, right? It's not like how much do you talk or how little do you talk. It's where do you derive your energy
I can
from.
turn it on though. I can turn it on when I
Right.
need to, and I'm very good at turning it on. But when I go home after this, I'm gonna be so tired and I'm gonna be done talking and I won't talk to anyone else for the rest of the night. So
I love it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, just to round out the point of like the suffering and pain, the paradox of it is that some of the happiest people I know are the ones that have gone through the greatest trials and adversities in their life, right? Because it's that contrast and that juxtaposition. And it's like, I've gone through so much, like I should just be grateful and happy, especially, the near-death experience of you with cancer. And like, dude, I've come close to suicide in my life, right? Like, and I know we've had mental health struggles. And so like having gone through that experience, it's easy to kind of see the bright side for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, look, I have certainly struggled with mental health myself. I mean, I wouldn't say that I've had like clinical problems with it, but I can have 6 month periods where I'm down on myself and I just have to fight through those times. But, ultimately, I think it's fairly normal that when you're an entrepreneur, and it's something I don't think is talked about enough, but I mean, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs regularly who have really serious problems with depression and just the challenges that you
You sent
face
me that
being in.
book. You sent me that book,
Right.
dude. That book changed my life.
It's true though. I mean, and I think you almost, and like back to the point about being a little crazy to be an entrepreneur, I think you almost have like a chip on your shoulder, and that can lead to some of the depression and to some of the challenges because it's never enough, and it's you always have to improve, and you become. See, I am not the kind of guy that is hard on myself because someone else has a Ferrari and I don't. I'm hard on myself because I expect more of myself, and I'm disappointed in my limited success. And so I think a lot of us entrepreneurs can be just so hard on ourselves that it can be pretty difficult for me to, yes, I am very happy and I'm very lucky to have an amazing family and friends, but sometimes I have a really hard time separating myself from the work that I'm doing every day and just the obsession that I take with everything I'm doing. And it can be kind of all encompassing and just spill into the rest of my life. And my fiance is always saying like you're not present right now, and it's really it's a true challenge that I
I
think we
think that's
face.
part of it too, right? Like the entrepreneurial experience is manic depressive, right? And so it kind of attracts people that thrive on that lifestyle. And I'm certainly in that camp, and you guys both know why that's the case. But like also too, what you said about being present, I'm definitely that I definitely have that issue too, right? It's head in the clouds, visionary, looking into the future. It's like, dude, I like when I forget my keys all the time. Like I'm like running into people on the streets because like I'm just thinking like 2030, 2035, like where's my business going to be? Where am I going to be? And so, I think that's where like having the right person in your life, whether it's your boys or like your girlfriend, fiance, family, or just like a meditation practice, or like for Danny and I going to the gym, it kind of forces you into that moment. It's kind of really healthy as an entrepreneur for those that are kind of stuck, living most of their lives in the future. Like, I'm sure all of us are.
Yeah,
That's the
it's
same
hard.
advice I give everyone else, but I don't listen to it myself.
Yeah,
I don't really listen either.
that's that's the truth. It's like so important because it's like you said, it's 100%. I'm the most critical of myself because I expect the most from myself, right? And um, it also makes it hard on other relationships in my life, at least, because I'm trying to hold people to lower standards than I hold myself, but I'm holding myself to such a high standard that even a lower standard is still like impossible to live up to. And it is that double standard of, like the journey. I always have to remind myself, like the journey is the destination, like the journey of growth. I look back and again, like I didn't go through crazy physical stuff, but I'm like in recovery, sober alcoholic, been sober going on 9 years now. And um like the growth, the person I was back then, and it was like funny because hey, I'm this go lucky kid, and then something happens and it's like I go down this right, took the wrong fork in the road, but that fork led me to where
It
I
was
am
the
today.
right
i'm
one.
sitting here I'm
It was
sitting
the
here
right one.
talking to you guys, right? And I have this story now, but like the growth is I look at this as like, well, I'm not present. It's because I'm a dreamer, right? Like I'm always thinking of the future. How big can it be? What can I go change? What impact can I have? And it's like, if I'm sitting here being present all the time, I'm not having those thoughts. So how am I going to go execute on those things? So it's almost like this curse. It's like the curse of an
Well,
entrepreneur.
the action's in the present,
Right.
right?
Right.
And like
Exactly.
you got to find that equilibrium.
But imagine if
Exactly.
you didn't have the hope though, like you didn't have the hope that you could achieve it and you just thought that you would never achieve the things that you're thinking about all day. I mean, that to me is
Hell.
way more depressing than the challenge that we're complaining about of
Yeah.
all the stuff we have to deal with every day. I
Yep.
mean, a lack of hope is like the worst thing that you can have.
Yeah. it's like you have to have the visibility into the future, and then you have to have the hope that you're capable of achieving that. But how do you generate that hope? It's having confidence that you could actually do that yourself. But then doing something yourself involves sticking into the present moment and taking actions day by day. And that's kind of the entrepreneur. And one just like quote that I love that we were talking about earlier. It's like talking about adversity and suffering. I love that quote, and it's like overly religious, but it doesn't have to be. It's like um, God reserves the hardest trials or adversities for the strongest soldiers, or whatever it is, right? And
Uh-huh.
I think all of us are probably in that camp in many ways.
Yeah. Kyle, you touched on I just want to address something before we wrap up, but um I heard a lot about like leadership and what you've been saying and what you've been talking about, and it sounds like you really enjoy like leading people. What obviously you're the CEO of a company, so that is your responsibility, but like what's your favorite part about being a leader day to day?
Good question.
Uh,
We don't talk about that enough.
I
The
th- I
conflict
think
resolution.
um, I think that the world disappoints me frequently with how certain leaders act or do things, and maybe this is back to the ego thing, but I think I operate with the utmost honesty, transparency, in a very positive way, and I think I'm the kind of person that will explain why things need to be done a certain way, and it has worked really well when managing people because usually someone's told to do something and then that they don't understand why, and so they resist it. I think just seeing such poor leadership all over the place in life, and back to the experience of when I was in investment banking, and I thought there was just really poor leadership in some of those places. I think I feel that I can do better with that, and I feel that no, if no one else can do it, then I need to be the one that will step up to do it. And I did not I'm still not a great leader, but I still think I'm better than most of the people that I've ever worked with at this point. And I think it's a huge honor to be a leader. And just watching my dad be such a trusted resource um, as a doctor, and just regularly getting people just coming out of the woodwork, caring a lot about his input, and being in that position where you can be really helping somebody significantly and taking ownership, extreme ownership of the outcome for them. I think I feel the same way about the financial services industry and being a leader within that because people's finances is one of their most important pieces of their lives. And so if you can be that trusted, honest, well-liked person helping with that, I think I get a lot of personal satisfaction out of that. And I think that creates the meaning in my life. Obviously, there's the family part of my life, which is the most important thing to me. But really, other than that, all I have is the fulfillment that I get from being that trusted helper of people from this perspective. And I think it's also creating an opportunity for people that are really capable, but for whatever reason, they just haven't had as much success in their career yet. Like I meet so many people every day at our firm who started from nothing, or they just had tough circumstances, or they just kind of fell into the role that they're in, and they just absolutely are crushing it, and they're making three times as much as they started off making, and hopefully we double that over time. I mean, for me, that's really a cool accomplishment if I can make everybody rich and make everyone successful and really help them in their lives. I've got a long way to go with that, but I think that's going to be the most fun part of this whole thing for me.
Yeah, and that's what'll drive you every time you get kicked in the face is
Right.
like it's
The
not
North
about me.
Star.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
not.
about me. Yeah. Oh man, that's so inspiring. I have like goosebumps because I love leadership, and again, I think you're kind of similar. I'm in financial services on the wealth management side, and I get to be a leader of like my team that works for me for my clients, but I also get to be a leader with my clients as well, right? Exactly what you were saying. And like I tell people all the time, I love working with clients. I don't even care what the dollar is, when they are like genuinely engaged and then thankful because the light bulb turns up, they're like, oh my gosh, there's so much value here. We're talking about whatever level you're at, whether it's, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, your family name is going to be on a building at your alumnus, or if we do X, Y, and Z, guess what? You'll never have to worry about running out of money. And just the thankfulness that they have, the trust that they have. Because again, I look at myself, we're financial doctors, right? It's the same thing. It's just a different area of someone's life. And the fulfillment that I get from that is unmatched, right? It's like no drug I've ever done ever, right? Or could possibly do. So
I mean, even in light of all the angry people that we have to deal with at times, right? And the challenges, the fulfillment that comes from saving somebody 150,000 on their tax bill and not losing their house, or, things like that just a little bit of our help and just insight to be able to help people with that situation. I mean, there's just nothing better than that. So
completely. Good stuff. Well, I mean, this was a phenomenal podcast. I mean, Kyle, thank you so much for coming on, and really enjoyed the conversation as always. And absolutely would love to have you on as you kind of evolve as an entrepreneur, which is like kind of a relatively new chapter in your life in some ways. And as the business evolves as well, it's going to be really fun to kind of follow your experience in your whole period, just like, in real time. I'm documenting SovDoc and Avenir, and, Danny's doing some entrepreneurial things at the side on the side. And I think he's going to probably, jump ship and become one at some point, full time at some point. So,
well,
yeah,
thanks for having me on, guys. Danny, it was really great meeting you, and really
You
enjoyed
too,
the time
Kyle.
with you guys.
Come out to LA soon, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, come visit soon. Hold on, before we jump off, I'm going to start doing this. I need to start photo opping the calls. All right. Kyle, man, dude, that literally such a privilege. Like, thank you so much. Honestly, time's valuable, and really appreciate you doing that. And like Rob said, really excited to just, I mean, I'm guessing you're a similar age to Rob. So it's, you said you graduated in 2017. So, it's fun connecting with guys. I'm older than you guys, not by a lot, but I got a few years on you. But it's so fun connecting with people like in our age group and just kind of growing together. It's going to be so amazing. Like, as a dreamer, right? I'm sitting here looking at like, it's going to be so enjoyable when we're 80, 90 years old. Obviously, with technology and medicine, I'm going to 100, 150, like easy, no problem. But just sitting there looking and being able to look back and have these memories of us together and be like, look at the legacy, look at the impact we were able to have, right? And look at us
look at how far we came, right?
Yeah.
Look at how far we came, right? Like,
and
we're gonna look back and be like, oh my God, like we had no idea what was gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think my hope is that we're worrying a lot about our success right now, and then we wish that we weren't worrying about it as much because we'll be so successful in both our personal lives and professionally. But I think we have a very positive future ahead of us, and I'm really excited about it. And next time, are you in LA as well, Danny?
Yep.
So next time I'm out there, we'll all get together.
Yeah, and even if we 10x our success for the next 10 years as entrepreneurs, I know we're going to find a way to worry. So we might as well enjoy the worry.
Yeah, you just got to get used to it. That's just life. So
yeah, cool. All right, guys.